boy named Caleb meets a woman named Maria in her office to discuss his father's death benefits as part of his contract as a miner on the moon, which is now home to many people who chose to leave Earth. Maria shares her condolences with Caleb, especially as he's now an orphan after his mom died years ago. Maria then tells him that as part of Michael's death benefits, he will be transported from the moon to a place called Omega. She adds that the journey to Omega is 75 years, and he would be in a cryosleep throughout the journey, which means he'd remain in his young body when he gets there. Caleb asks if going to Omega is compulsory and he has to go there, but Maria says many people are looking for similar opportunities, and he should be grateful that his late parents were able to sacrifice a lot for him to make it to Omega. She then says the transport will be ready in 3 days after the lockdown that would start later that day due to incoming meteor showers. Caleb is shocked to hear this because the transport was initially meant to be ready in 2 months. However, Maria says things have changed. She tells him that even though it might feel somehow at the moment, it's going to be the start of something new for him in Omega. Caleb soon leaves her office and starts climbing a tower. When he gets to the top, he remembers how his father Michael used to take him there when he was much younger. Michael would show him the stars and also tell him about things happening outside where they live, which is called the Dome. During one of their conversations, Michael shows him the location of a crater he and Caleb's mom used to sneak to. He says if Caleb is a little older, he'll take him there. As Caleb remembers his father, his best friend, Dylan, meets him at the top of the tower. He asks Caleb how things went with Maria, and Caleb says they're putting him on a transport to Omega in 3 days. Dylan doesn't look happy to hear this, but he tells Caleb they're still going to embark on the mission to find the crater his dad always talked about. He says if Michael wanted him to see it, then there must be something special about it. As they continue talking, their friends, Marcus and Borny, also come up. The 4 friends then start talking about how they're still going forward with their mission to spend time with Caleb at the crater before he leaves for Omega. They head back to their room, and there, they take an account of all the supplies they currently have and if they need more. Just then, someone knocks on the door, and they immediately have to cover all their things. It turns out to be a messenger who came to deliver Michael's ashes to Caleb. After he collects it, his friends look sad for him, and shortly after, they head out to eat. There, Borny starts to sound unsure about the whole mission, though he says he's still going. Caleb then asks Marcus if he's also up for it, and despite thinking about it for a while, he says he also wants to go outside the dome. With everyone still on board, Caleb asks Dylan how they'll escape, since they don't have the access codes to the garage, where they'll be stealing a rover that will take them outside. Dylan says he has it figured out, and as they sit, he tells them the key to getting the access codes is a girl named Addison. Addison has just arrived on the moon from Earth, and she still has no friends. Dylan thinks she's the best person to help them because her dad is part of the science team, and he has all the codes. The other boys are not sure about this, especially because Addison is from Earth, and the way Earth people do things is quite different. Dylan says he'll still try, and shortly after he goes to sit with Addison. He introduces himself, but she doesn't seem interested and walks away. Dylan follows her, and she says she's not interested in talking to anyone because everyone who has spoken to her only wanted her help with something. Dylan knows he's there for the same thing, but he begs her, saying his best friend is about to leave for Omega and he just wants to do something nice for him. Dylan also mentions that Caleb is the son of the miner who recently died, and this convinces Addison to listen to him. He tells her they're going outside the dome and they plan to take one of the long-range rovers and use it for their trip. He also explains why he needs her help, and despite sounding confused because no one is allowed to leave the dome, Addison agrees to help on the condition that she goes with them. Dylan then returns to the table to inform the others about Addison's condition. Borny doesn't sound happy with this, and he thinks she'll make things weird for them because she doesn't know how they do things. However, Caleb says it's not a big deal if she wants to come with them since she's their only way out. They eventually bring her on board with their plan, and after they make it into the garage where the rover is, Dylan tries to get it to work. As he gets it to start working, he unknowingly sets off an alarm, and this causes all of them to panic because they could get caught. As they all wonder what they'll do, Caleb remains silent and looks at the container with his dad's ashes before then pulling a wire that stops the alarm. The 5 friends are relieved, and they immediately get into the rover just as an announcement is made through the speakers that everyone should prepare for a lockdown in 3 minutes. As Dylan drives to the gate, he tells Addison to go down to type in the codes to open it because she's scared they might leave her. She tells Caleb the codes and asks him to go and unlock the door. Just as Caleb is about to leave the rover, Addison puts her astronaut action figure on top of the rover's dashboard. Dylan looks surprised, and Addison says it's an Earth tradition for when people are going on road trips. Caleb gets down to type in the codes, and after the gate opens, they make it out of the dome and sound happy to be outside. After a while, Borny gives Marcus some pills to use, and when Addison asks what they're for, he tells her Marcus has a heart problem, and the pills are to keep him stable and prevent any complications. She also watches as Borny cares for Marcus and gives him some water to use the pills. A while later, Dylan sees a big structure and alerts the others to take a look. As they all look amazed by what they see and ask why it's uncompleted, Caleb says his dad used to tell him that after Omega was discovered, all the progress made on the moon was abandoned. They all then wonder how things would have been if places like that were completed. Addison says there are places like that on Earth, and Borny asks what other things are present on Earth. Addison mentions things such as TVs, books, and music. As Borny seems surprised by all that she mentions, Addison asks if they were not taught about those things in school. Dylan says they're only taught about helium and how to mine it. She then asks how they're able to know a lot about Earth, and Caleb says it's because his dad came to the moon from Earth. Addison says she thought all their parents were from Earth, but Dylan says it was his grandparents who came from Earth. Borny also says his great-grandparents were the ones who came from Earth. And Marcus says his family has been on the moon for a very long time. Addison doesn't understand this because she says everyone is entitled to travel to Omega after 20 years of work. The four boys say it's all a scam because for every delay at work, even when it's due to sickness, more years will be added. Dylan says his father even had to complete the 6 years left on his grandfather's contract before he started his own 20 years. Addison says she didn't think things were like that, and Marcus suddenly asks if the sky on Earth is actually blue. She says it is, and after a while, she asks Caleb what they're going to find in the crater. Caleb says he doesn't know, and that Michael always said he owed it to his mom to see the place because he promised her while she was dying that he'd take their son there. Borny then starts talking about how they'll find treasures there, because that's what his brother used to tell him. Dylan tells him to stop bringing up his brother's fake stories, but Borny says he'll be ready to get the treasures when they get there. As they seem to joke around about it, Caleb tells them to go outside and see what it's like for a while. They all agree and change to their suits, after which they head outside and start having fun. As they think of games to play, Addison suggests playing baseball, but when they give it a trial, the boys don't seem to like it. Dylan then decides to play a game where they'll use oxygen tanks to launch themselves into the air. Addison doesn't think this is a good idea because they'll end up wasting the oxygen, but Dylan says they brought an extra tank with them and they still have more. With this, they all start playing again, and to make it safe, they attach one end of a cable to the rover while the other end is on their suit to stop them from flying off. However, when Borny plays with it, the cable breaks and he is left moving around in the air. As they wonder what they'll do to help him, Marcus picks an oxygen tank to launch himself in the air to try and save Borny. Seeing this, Dylan and Caleb also pick one each and join Marcus to rescue Borny. After several attempts, with Addison giving them instructions on what to do, they rescue Borny, but all of them fall to the ground. As they land, Addison says they need to go back home because they won't have enough oxygen to reach the crater and also go back to the dome. Dylan tries to convince her that they can work something out, but she says it's the best case situation for them. However, Caleb says he knows of an outpost where the first settlers used to get their supplies when they went for explorations. By using Addison's projector bracelet, they find the place and decide that it's where they have to go next. As they continue their journey, Borny remembers that he has heard stories about the outpost from his brother. He says there are space ghosts there, and even though Caleb tries to tell him that something like that is not real, he insists that he knows what he's talking about. As Borny continues to sound scared, Dylan gets angry and stops the rover. He faces Borny and says he doesn't understand why he keeps believing fake stories from his brother, who is a loser. Borny doesn't like this and tells him to take it back, but Dylan repeats it. Borny then says he doesn't mind having a loser brother, as long as there's no coward in his family. This gets Dylan angry, and as both of them start fighting, Caleb shouts for them to call it off. He then asks them if they really want him to remember them like that, and with this, they apologize to each other. They continue their journey, and shortly after, they get to the outpost. Despite looking sacred, they tell each other they just need to get the oxygen tanks and leave. As they enter, the whole place is dark, but they're able to use a torch to look around. Suddenly, they see a figure sitting down, and Borny shouts that it's a space ghost. Everyone goes into panic mode and seems to stumble on several figures in the place. Fortunately, Addison finds the lights and turns them on. They then realize that there are no ghosts and it's just mannequins. As they wonder where they are, Addison says it's a model home, and she has heard of places like that, which are only meant to showcase designs that people might like to adopt for their homes. They decide to split up to see what they can find. Addison and Dylan search the same room, and she asks him about what Borny said in the rover. Dylan hesitates at first, but says Borny was referring to his father, who escaped and left his family alone when he found things difficult, while still trying to complete his father's pending 6-year contract along with his own. He then tells Addison not to look at him with pity, but as he seems to sound harsh, she says she was only trying to get to know him, after which she just walks away. Shortly after, Borny and Marcus inform the others that they found oxygen tanks and a lot of food. They all enjoy a feast and eat to their satisfaction. Later that night, while Addison is talking about a war on Earth, she mentions that she has a brother named Charlie. She says after her parents got divorced, her mother chose to go to Omega with Charlie, even though they'd be in cryo-sleep for 75 years. She adds that it was why her father also decided to head for the moon. After a while, as they're talking about the model house, Caleb convinces them to scatter the whole place, because it represents how things could have been if the government hadn't chosen to abandon them. After they smash everything in the house, and while others are sleeping, Caleb and Addison are unable to get some sleep, and she asks him about how he met Dylan. Caleb tells her a funny story of how they met, when he was trying to get some food from a refrigerator on the night his mom died. He says Dylan helped him sneak in to get some sandwiches, and even though they didn't know each other before that day, Dylan sat with him throughout the night. He then tells Addison that when he's gone to Omega, he asks her to be with Dylan, because his journey will be tougher on him than the others. When they wake up, they continue their journey, but the rover soon stops. So that they can still use the oxygen they have left to walk to the crater, Addison sends a distress signal to the dome. Despite the others looking confused, she says it's their best chance of surviving because the dome will send a crew to come and get them. Since it's a good idea that will let them make it to the crater on foot, they start their walk until they finally get there. They look excited and go in, only to find an empty building. However, Addison is able to find a switch that changes the look of the place to somewhere on Earth. It turns out that Michael wanted Caleb to come over to see what Earth looks like. Suddenly, the illustration shuts down, and just as he looks around, Caleb sees the place where his mother's ashes were buried. He also sees a picture of his parents. He doesn't look happy about this, saying Michael knew about the death benefit and killed himself, so Caleb could go to Omega. He says he'll tell Maria when they return so he can stay back. However, Dylan convinces him that he'll be making a bad decision. He says whatever Michael did was because he loved Caleb. He also adds that he would do anything to leave the moon, but he's okay with allowing Caleb to leave because a part of his friends will definitely follow him, and it will be like they're also on Omega. Just then Marcus falls, and Borny says it's because he hasn't used his pills. They carry him out, but suddenly the meteor showers start, and things get dangerous for them. Borny manages to get Marcus to the rover, and while trying to also join them, Dylan gets hit, and Caleb has to carry him to the rover along with Addison. After a while, Dylan remains unconscious, and the others realize that there's no one coming to get them. Shortly after, Dylan wakes up and calls on Caleb, while the others are sleeping as they lose oxygen. Dylan then tells Caleb that seeing the illustration of Earth in the crater was the best thing to happen to him. He also tells Caleb that he'll always be his best friend. Just then, Dylan also falls asleep, and his suit powers off just like the others. Caleb's suit also powers off as he passes out, but a bright light shines in his direction as it appears that the rescue vehicles actually came. When Caleb wakes up, he looks shocked to see where he is, but a nurse tells him he's already in Omega after his 75 years of sleep on the journey there. Caleb says the last thing he remembers was being on the rover, and he didn't even say goodbye to his friends. As he panics, The nurse tells him everything will be all right. She later informs him that the foster family that will take him in will soon be around. Shortly after, Caleb is given a transmitter that contains all the messages he received from Dylan over the years while he was sleeping. As he listens to it and goes about his day, Caleb hears Dylan say things are okay with all his friends. He also says he got married to Addison, who, along with Borny, started riots to correct the problems with the contracts. Days later, Caleb finds Addison's brother, Charlie, and gives him Addison's astronaut action figure, saying she kept it in his bag and asked him to give it to her brother. Charlie sounds excited to finally see Caleb because Addison had already told him a lot of things about their adventure on the moon. As Caleb says he needs someone to show him around, Charlie offers to be of help, and Caleb says they'll go on some adventures together. Thanks for tuning in. A thumbs up would be amazing because I've got some bills to pay.
Back in my bag and I gotta brag, I do this shit for real. When we was down and we had nothing, we had to share a meal. We put the shit in overdrive with no steering wheel.